corporate? What does that word do to you?
It really is just fear. Something new or something has to change or you're not doing a good enough job. Corporate initiatives are put into a store as if there's empty space or time that we're just going to put that into, no problem. It's like who do I want to disappoint today? Someone's going to be disappointed in me. Who do I want it to be?
It's 2025 and retail is obsessed with AI and innovation to stay competitive. Companies are rolling out new tech solutions constantly, but there is a fundamental problem that's been growing for decades, one that's costing retailers millions of dollars in failed initiatives and lost revenue. Despite all of our technological advances, the disconnect between corporate and store teams is wider than ever. If you're a corporate leader, you need to hear this because you're investing millions in solutions that aren't working. The view you're getting of your stores is incomplete at best, distorted at worst. And while each of your departments is creating well-intentioned initiatives, they're often causing new problems and risking your long-term sustainability and profitability. If you're a store leader, you need to hear this because you're not alone. That feeling that corporate doesn't understand your reality, those competing priorities that seem impossible to balance, that pressure to put on a show during corporate visits, it's happening everywhere. And it's part of a larger pattern that we need to break. Both sides desperately want the same thing: successful stores and happy customers. Both are working incredibly hard and both are frustrated by the current system. Yet somehow, the gap keeps growing. This is not about blame. Both corporate and store teams are trapped in a broken system. So today, we're diving deep into that disconnect with my co-host, Matt Copeland, a veteran store manager who has seen some things in his decades leading stores from multiple giant household brands. I'm Bekki Cait, and as a retail consultant, I've watched this pattern repeat across the industry. The truth is, retail's biggest problem isn't technology. It is basic human and that's exactly what we need to talk about. The conversation I'm about to have with Matt is the one I wish my corporate clients would have with their store teams. So, we're gonna have it for them. Matt, we tried to have this conversation a couple weeks ago.
We did.
We ended up talking for 3+ hours. It became clear to me that we needed to rein it in a little bit and focus this up. So that's what we've done this time. That said, I still want to start the same way. I just want to level set on something very basic, the vibe that stores get when they hear about corporate. As a store leader, what does that word do to you?
I believe the phrase that I'm looking for is triggered. But no, I think for a lot of people, myself included, that can mean so many things. It really is just fear, I think is the easiest way to put it. Is it something new or something has to change or you're not doing a good enough job? It's often not in a context of reward or something done well.
Just a specific example, corporate's coming for a visit. How does that feel? What does that mean for your store?
It means a lot of prep, a lot of anxiety for everyone involved. I had a visit actually, and the corporate leader visiting was like, your team seems like they're walking on eggshells today. And I'm like, that's because of you. That's not me.
Right. How about, hey, there's a new corporate initiative. What does that mean to you?
Oh boy. No one hears that and thinks, oh, good. A problem I've been longing to solve is going to be solved. Oftentimes it means something is going to get more complicated or involve more paperwork or steps or more technology or different technology.
Okay. We're going to do our best to break this down. I think it makes sense if we flow from the tactical day-to-day realities to the strategic mission and metrics, and then we'll get into the human elements like communication and trust. So we talk a lot about the day-to-day reality gap. Talk to me about how corporate initiatives end up colliding with store realities.
That's a loaded one, but I think a big piece of it is, I think oftentimes corporate initiatives are put into a store as if there's empty space or time that we're just going to put that into, no problem, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It's going to solve something for us. We're all going to be happy. As if, say, this is a corporate setting. And I'm not saying they have a bunch of blank space time, but you can calendar in a call or something you want to do in a corporate setting, and you can make that work. You can move other calls. I can't move customers. I can't tell them from 10 and 11, I need no one to bother us. We have a new corporate initiative to launch. I can't tell the employee who was at home with the flu, I'm so sorry. please come in. We have a new corporate initiative to launch. I can't tell the computers not to break down and say, hey, tech, if you could just bear with me from 10 to 11, I have a corporate initiative I need to get done. So it's really just they're not factoring in the day-to-day life that happens in a retail store, and not even necessarily things that go wrong, but things that just end up changing your priorities throughout the day.
And I get it. When you work in an office, all the work is done at your computer, in meetings, in your digital spaces, at your workplace. This is something we began showing to our corporate clients. That's where your work happens. And so that's where they try to communicate and make things happen in stores.
Mhm.
But the store equivalent of a meeting might be a huddle. The store equivalent of your office might be your break room. The store equivalent of your intranets and your apps, depending on the company, might be your posters, or if you have an employee app, something like that. Those things are breaks from the work. The majority of your time is on the floor helping customers. Or should be. Yeah, right. So in a way, a lot of what they're asking you to do is stop working and do our thing. It sounds like even though you have a direct boss, your district manager, that's not the only person you get directives from. How many bosses do you have?
A lot. I would argue in some way, customers are bosses, employees are bosses in some ways. They have their own expectations about what a store manager is going to deliver for them. Again, whether it be their schedule or how they're treated. And then, of course, you have your district manager who's relaying, hopefully, the global vision for what the company wants. But then there's also emails and communication from VPs, maybe even a president or a CEO, but also from someone in marketing, because they've decided that some signage plinth that's in men's should now be in women's, because that signage is talking about buy online pickup in store, and they've noticed that it gets more traction when it's in women's athletic wear. So you actually need to move that sign now and send a picture, please. That has been done. And then maybe you'll get an email from visual merchandising. Now that you've moved that signage plinth to athletic wear, we don't like how the yoga pants are looking next to it. So if you want to move the yoga pants to the back wall and move the mesh tops to the front, please send a picture when you're done. And so there's a lot of different teams sending different directives at different times. And then, of course, a DM is often a good DM is summing that up and making sure you got all of the separate communication so that you can not miss a deadline.
What do you think the intention is behind all of those directives? Why is marketing asking you to do these things? Why is merchandise? Why is this all coming to you?
At the core of it, we all want the store to succeed. We all want the company to succeed. And that is their goal. They're looking at their marketing data, and their marketing data is telling them something that stores could do differently for the betterment of the company. Same thing with merchandising, same thing with all the other departments. And so it's a lot of everyone trying to do the best for the company at the same time, all at once, with oftentimes different data sets.
Do you get the sense that those departments are talking to each other?
No.
Yeah.
Almost never.
So everyone has ideas, good or bad. I'm not saying they're not great ideas about how the store can be more successful. And of course, everyone is doing the right thing and trying to share their ideas and sending them to you, the store manager. But the reality is you get an avalanche of directives from different people. And that's something that you have to manage on top of your customers, which maybe should be your main priority. How have you handled this in the past? Have you had to make sacrifices?
Definitely make sacrifices. And it's often something customer centric, unfortunately. I can't say specific what that may be, but if an employee needs something from me, I'm going to prioritize that because I want to follow through on my promise. If marketing needs something, I don't want to look like the store manager who doesn't care. So I want to do that. And so in order to get those things done, maybe I'm pulling someone off the floor that's affecting service so I can get my stuff done so that they can do maybe what I was going to do or some arrangement of that. And then what gets sacrificed is coverage.
You have to choose between, am I going to focus on this corporate experience, giving corporate what they want, sending them their photos, getting things done on time, or do I focus on the customer experience?
For sure. Yeah. It's like, who do I want to disappoint today? Someone's going to be disappointed in me. And who do I want it to be?
Oh my gosh. The bottom line is corporate doesn't understand what's happening in stores day to day. If you don't know where your initiatives land and how they land, how can you possibly expect them to be done optimally or at all? Is it mostly a time thing?
Yeah, I think it's mostly a time thing. Sometimes it's a resources thing. Well, I guess time is a resource, but whether that be like labor or skill for a merchandise move, depending on the skill set in your store at the moment, that could require more or less people. Because I have someone really skilled, that's maybe going to take me 3 hours. If I have a team, I don't happen to have that skill set on today and it's due today, like it's something they've sent through as urgent.
Right.
Well, now it's going to take me twice as long, or I have to do it personally, which is fine. I don't mind getting my hands dirty, but now I'm not running the store. I'm doing this project to get it done and I'm not seeing the whole picture. So yes, it's time, but also there's a lot of other little factors, I think.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe we'll dig into those now. I want to break down what stand out to me as 4 root causes that force the gap wider and to stay open. I'll lay them out. Problematic communication systems, what we call the mission versus metrics paradox, the brand protection versus empowerment paradox, and then finally the trust and safety gap. So no big deal.
Just a few, again, all very simple.
All right. Problematic communication systems. To me, there are 2 parts to this. There's issues with the day-to-day communications. And then from my perspective, there is a massive issue involving the annual or sometimes biannual employee engagement survey that I think feeds into the day-to-day communication. Any first initial thoughts on why communication in retail between corporate and stores is so hard?
The first thing that comes to my mind is just how many ways we can be communicated with. Is it an app? Is it a text? Is it an email? Is it through an intranet? Is it through a portal? Some of the companies I've worked for, one of the companies I worked for, I was a new store manager trainer. So I trained new store managers and helped onboard them. And I remember having to go through with a couple of them and be like, okay, so here's my system for taking the 5 areas you get information from and collating them into one for yourself. Because if you don't do that, you will get lost, you will miss something, and no one will care that it was in the thing you didn't think it was supposed to be in. So just like in the habit of checking these 5 sources and then pulling it all onto your own written or typed thing so you stay organized. So that to me is the first thing that comes to mind. It's just how many ways we can communicate with corporate and how corporate can communicate with us.
Just so people know you're not exaggerating, how many communications channels have you had or do you tend to have in stores?
I think the least I've ever had, if I really were to think about it, and this was the best company that did communication, was 4.
Okay.
And the most, somewhere in the 8 or 9 range.
What are the communications? What kinds of things are we talking about here?
It's all over the map. I would say the method of communication is directly correlated with the importance of that communication. Some companies, if you get an email, that's like urgent. Not all companies, but if some companies, that's urgent. That's something you need to do today.
Right.
Not in a little while, right now. You're reading this email, do the thing. And then if they put it in the company portal or some sort of intranet or messaging service, that's going to come with its own due date that you can check off that you've done it. So that's not high as a priority. One of the biggest things that happens is you're going to miss something inevitably. And sometimes it's something important. And I think all store managers, regardless of how organized, how tenured, how smart, have missed something important. I know that I have missed things and then had to be like, oh, you're right. I didn't log in to that thing today, because oftentimes this is a separate issue to be discussed maybe later today or maybe some other day about technology. All of these things often have different logins. If I forgot my login for that thing or have to reset it or need to troubleshoot, then I'm going to miss the messages. So there's that layer of complication as well.
This brings up a really important point. I personally know more than a handful of retail companies where corporate is in the midst of rolling out new tech, new apps. This will tie into what I was mentioning about how the annual employee engagement survey ties into this problem directly. Corporate hears that stores feel like communication isn't great between corporate and stores. Usually the response is to throw money at it through technology. So clearly we need new tech to communicate with our stores better. You're a store manager, communication is hard. Corporate's like, good news, communication's going to get better. We've got a new app. Tell me how you feel.
So after I throw my phone, maybe quite literally sometimes, it's just another thing. And again, it's like another thing to log into. One of the biggest pain points of being a leader in 2025 is that not only do I have to manage my own 5 logins for things. Now my employee who works 6 hours a week is, oh, I haven't logged into that in a while. Can you help me reset my password? And now I'm on the phone with IT trying to help reset their password so they can get into the thing that was supposed to make communication better. And now we're spending time being like, oh, and then you call IT and they're like, did you use the reset link? And then everyone's frustrated. In conclusion, communication was not improved.
Yeah, I have a theory that most corporate communications programs, tools, initiatives from various corporate departments are a reaction to the previous employee engagement survey. For one, the engagement survey, especially if it's an annual engagement survey, I think is wild in retail because retail famously has a turnover rate of like 70 to 90%, which means that by the time you do the next survey, 70 to 90% of those people are gone. A problematic way to base all of your communication strategies off of right at the get-go there. But here's what I see happen at most large corporate retailers. Engagement survey happens. HR takes all the negative survey result, all the things they think they need to improve on, and they divide them by which department should fix those results. So people feel like they don't have a future here career-wise. Talent development, you need to fix that. People don't feel like they're learning and growing, learning and development, you need to fix that. Our LGBTQ population is scoring lower. D&I, what are you going to do about that? Divide and conquer. Part of the problem is that feedback gets lumped into broad buckets that erase any potential for deep understanding or nuanced conversation. So I think that's part of it. And to be honest, usually the feeling that most of those corporate departments get when they get these mandates, they think it's an awareness issue. They don't think it's maybe a substance, context, or usability issue. So the response is, we need to tell them more. We need to send more communications about our thing because they just don't know. That's why they think it's not good. So anyway, you have 10 different corporate departments now with their own mandates. That becomes their KPI for success. And driving that number becomes more important than the actual engagement itself. The response to try and improve engagement is to flood you with more communications about their thing. I don't think that's improving engagement.
And then also that all falls on the store manager inevitably anyway. Now they have 8 departments with competing priorities, wanting them to do something. And then they're like, oh my God, how do I implement these 8 new initiatives on top of everything else I'm doing? And maybe some of them aren't even relevant to my store based on my engagement survey.
So true. Going back to that day-to-day issue about how these people aren't talking to each other and they don't understand the reality. I've asked myself why this keeps happening. And honestly, I don't think that's a complicated answer. I think it's just this is a system that's very strong and mighty thanks to status quo. This is how things have been done for decades, especially if you're a giant retailer with tens or hundreds of thousands of employees. These things are expensive, they're time consuming, it's hard to get feedback in a nuanced way. And those are all true. Those are all real problems.
I think people are really, in general, this is for the psychology offshoot podcast that I keep joking about, but I think in general, people are afraid of change and afraid of changing the status quo. You need some inertia, and that's really hard to create. And again, I think I said this to you a long time ago, like what I would give for someone to do something big and bold in retail. Because even if it failed, people would be like, oh, wow, they're like really shaking it up. Like the store level people, if it was exciting change, would really hop on board. But a new initiative, a new app, a new technology, like that's not exciting because we're like, oh yeah, this. Some store leaders who've been around long enough, sometimes they don't even adopt the new thing fully because they're like, well, they're going to give up on this in 3 months. So I'm not even going to, I've already seen this happen, this cycle. So I'm not even going to adopt this at all because I know they're just going to give up on it because I've seen so many of these things fail. So there's also that issue at hand.
Millions of dollars on the rollout of these apps. Honestly, I think corporate does think it's exciting and new and a bold move.
We can tell in the verbiage when corporate thinks something is exciting. And you're reading it and you're like, is it exciting to who?
What would need to happen can an app improve this?
Yes, actually. I'm going to say yes. The launch of that app, this is the email I want. Every corporate leader listening, this is the email, is we are launching a new app. This app replaces every other system and portal we use. You will log into one app, and that app will tell you everything you need to know. Don't check your email, text messages, Slack, WhatsApp, or any other messaging app. Just check this app, and you will know everything you must know about the company and what you need to do. So yes, an app can solve it, but it needs to be one app. Just one.
One app to rule them all for my Lord of the Rings.
And I will say that towards the end of my time at one place, they were launching an app that had a lot of what I'm saying in it. It wasn't everything, but it was close. From an IT perspective, I understand that what I'm asking for is a lot more complicated than just creating an app. And I do understand that there's integration issues with payroll systems and benefits systems, because a lot of benefits companies now have their own app. But at the very least, I'd like an app that could link to the other apps, like the benefits app and the payroll app, but still have one place to go. That's the place to go. If it's not in here, it doesn't exist.
You can get wherever you need to go from there.
Yes.
So it is both a quantity issue, the amount of communications you get, but also the quantity of channels you have to check. But then it's also a substance issue. Some of the communications you get aren't relevant to you, maybe in general, or maybe just in your market or in your store. Okay, let's move on to the mission versus metrics paradox. This is when the very act of measuring and optimizing specific metrics undermines the business goals those metrics were meant to support. Sometimes in my mind, this goes AKA long-term versus short-term results. Can you tell me about a time where maybe you felt like you were sacrificing the mission? And the mission can be something as simple as excellent customer service or a metric.
The launch of omni-channel services in stores, maybe not so much now in 2025. A lot of companies have rooted out the worst of them, but in the beginning, especially the launch, it's meant to lead to more sales, make the store more profitable, because now you're basically using your store as not only a pickup, but some companies have ship from store. So you're basically like a mini warehouse. One of the companies I worked for, customer service was really important. Some companies are more operational. You put stuff on a table, make sure it's stocked and it sells. But I worked somewhere where one-on-one service was really important. And they had ship from store in December, where that company did almost 30% of the year in that 1 month. We would get 100 ship from store orders a day. And a team, this is important, a team of 6 or 7 people working a day. So prioritizing shipping out, and that's a lot of money to be made, right? Like we want to make that money, but also it's December. I'm already going to make that money if I just go on the sales floor and help customers. So there was a real tension where you have to figure out, how do I do this and not affect the customer experience? And the answer is to go back to time. Sometimes I did really long days where I came in really early to do most of those orders so that I wasn't pulling anyone off the floor, because I'm salary, so I'm free in that extra time. And that's not a good solution. I don't recommend that to anybody in the long term. And then there's other metrics where we just shift to focusing on a different metric. So maybe it's not a new launch. Maybe we're hardcore about conversion. How many people are buying versus how many people are coming in. Meanwhile, you're driving down another metric in average sale or something else because you're so focused on everyone. And the person who's, I'm just looking, you're like, but I must convert you. Like, it's the mentality sometimes. Meanwhile, there's someone who would spend twice what they're already spending, but can't find what they're looking for or need help. And you're misplacing resources because of this dogmatic approach to one number.
So first, probably to acknowledge it's hard to measure mission, right? I think that's why this happens, is they're like, this is our mission. We want customers, we want loyalty, we want market share, we want customers to love us the most. Here are the things that we're going to do to make things better for our customers. We're going to allow them to order online and pick up in stores. We're going to allow them whatever it is. And then we're going to measure those things. And the success of them is going to tell us how happy and loyal our customers are to us. That's the thinking. But then stuff happens like you just talked about. Right? You're sacrificing maybe an in-store customer experience for an online shopper, a different customer. I've seen this happen with loyalty programs or store credit cards. Sometimes are a way for retailers to measure something like customer loyalty. Can you tell me about how, say, credit card signups as a metric for customer loyalty can become putting the metric before the mission?
This will get me immediately blacklisted from any company that requires credit card signups. I think it's a separate conversation, but credit card signups to me and asking a 17-year-old cashier to sell someone something that impacts their credit is morally unhinged. And I think we treat it as something that's normal, and it's not. And I want to side note that I went to Michael's, the craft store, and they had self-checkout, which was wild to me, but I did it. And they ask you if you want to sign up for a credit card on the self-checkout. And I was like, this is honestly how it should be, because I get to say no. No one's pressuring me. No one's asking me several times. I just yesterday was at a big department store and the woman asked me 3 times and I did not get upset because I know that she's probably been told, like we all have, don't stop until they say no 3 times or 2 times, depends on the company, which is so aggressively bad service because I've said no and I mean it. I don't want your 29.89% interest credit card. I just don't. And so I think for me, where it mixes up mission is getting to that number of credit cards you're supposed to get a day is also putting pressure on customers they don't want. And then customers in turn, it actually affects employee experience because there are customers who aren't me and who do not, and I don't blame them, quite frankly, who do not have any chill. And they're like, I don't want the credit card. Stop asking. And they're very aggressive because they're sick of it. And they view it as bad service because it is. Because if you go onto the floor and you say, can I help you? And someone's like, I'm good. And you keep helping, bad service. You're not giving the customer what they want. And so I'll get off my little soapbox, but credit cards are really a way where we really do a customer disservice. There are times where offering the credit card is the right thing and the customer really is going to benefit and they are excited. And it is a responsible choice on their part. But I would say that is so much less frequently than we treat it. And it actually makes me sick to my stomach how gross the tactics are some of the places that I've worked. But yeah, so it goes completely against the mission.
You said something in there too that I think is an important part of the mission metric conversation. Even just your example of you walk into a store and someone is browsing and you ask them 3 times, can I help you? Can I help you find something? That's something some stores measure, right? Some companies want to measure, whether it is a scripted greeting or please greet the customer this X seconds into their entry.
Which is every retailer.
Right.
Some even have what we call a person in the front who has to do a promo shout. So basically every time someone walks in, you're like, hi, welcome to fill in brand. Just so you know, if you buy 2 jeans, you get a t-shirt for half off every single time.
Right. And it's awkward. The customer feels it. The customer knows it's weird. I can tell you, I have personally, as a customer, avoided walking into a store if someone is right there looking way too eager.
Right.
That probably says something about me as a shopper, but something that was probably meant to enhance the customer experience and make me feel seen or whatever. It's authentic and uncomfortable for me. I think that's a perfect segue into the next thing we wanted to talk about, which was the brand protection versus empowerment paradox. It's exactly what we were just talking about. This is when corporates' efforts to protect the brand through standardization and control actually damage the brand by preventing authentic customer connections because they disempower employees, which diminishes employee engagement. We talked about a couple, right? The 10-second greeting.
I don't know where companies get this data because the amount of times I've heard data in retail and then I try to look it up and I'm like, where did you find this? I think this is a retail myth from higher up people. I don't mean from peers or even DMs. I mean like VPs, etc., who are like, so there's data that says that if you greet someone within 30 seconds versus if you don't, they're likely to spend. Where is that data? How did you acquire it? What was the methodology of that study? I'd like to know. These are questions I don't ask because that's not the hill I want to die on. But yeah, there is a lot of, we just know this works, so we're going to keep doing it. Just ping back to our status quo.
Regardless of what you feel as a human being, here's our data, so just do the thing. In defense of corporate's attempt our drive for standardization, right? Like we understand there's some need for some guidelines to ensure that customers have a consistent experience with your brand. We know there's a need to protect brand reputation. I will say we also know that we don't want everyone reinventing the wheel. It could be an efficiency thing. We need to scale. So why wouldn't we document and put these things in place? I also think that corporate feels like guidelines, in some instances, is supporting you. It's helping you. It's training. So when do those things become diminishing returns? Maybe you can start by talking about the impact on stores of too strict brand standards.
I think it starts to become suffocating when there's so many checklists and guidelines. I used to joke at a retailer I work for that was like that. We have tools for the tools that are for the tools. You get so lost in how many guidelines, tools, ops systems that at one point I was like, why don't they just hire robots? Because this is what you want. I don't even need to use my brain, or you don't want me to. I'm not sure which is the case. And I think you're right. A lot of times it is for streamlining. It's a turnover reactionary measure where we don't know how long people will stay. Because if you have people who are 10-year veterans, you have a district of 10 stores, and the average tenure, let's say it all averages out to 4 or 5 years, good amount of tenure. Well, you don't need as many guidelines because people know what they do. But if your average tenure is 1 year, my God, you do need tools for tools because everyone's running around. What do we do? So I think it's to protect them from that. a lot of times. When it comes to customer interaction, customer service, and any customer directly affected policy, so like a return policy is something that really comes to mind, that's too directive and there's too many charts and flowing to it, really takes away the human element. The amount of times I have done a return for a customer that I am not supposed to do, I can't even count anymore. Because sometimes a situation is just the right thing to do. And when I have our mission in my head, and then I have all the rules in my head, I go, I'm choosing the mission. That's just who I am. Sorry.
Throw back to mission versus metrics.
Yeah. But it does come down to empowerment, though, because when you have that many rules, you feel, well, I'm not supposed to do this return. But there could be a situation where the customers told you their whole story and you're like, oh, it really is right that we do this return. This just makes sense. I break this policy for the moment or this guideline. And so there are a lot of ways that guidelines become suffocating and then actually have the opposite intended effect where you're like paralyzed by, can I actually do this thing? Should I do this thing? Will I get in trouble? And that doesn't lead to anywhere good either.
How about with local needs? We know you've worked for a lot of retailers that span the nation globe. Have you ever gotten corporate directives that don't feel right because of your geographical location or your market?
For sure. I've actually worked places where it's such a mix because in Boston, we have this very popular street that's like a shopping destination. So you get a lot of tourists, but a mix of locals. And how those people want to be serviced is so different because you're helping people from around the world. Someone from Tokyo's version of great customer service is very different than someone from the Midwest versus someone from my native Boston who is, please don't look at me, talk to me, or acknowledge that I exist because I hate you and I'm here to buy a product and get out. And that's a very unflattering portrait of Boston. We're not that rude, but there is a contingent of people who shop like that, me included. I give a lot of grace because I work in retail and understand what's being asked. Unless I talk to you, just pretend I don't exist. I know what I'm here for, and good service to me is leaving me alone. And so I think there are a lot of directives like greeting right when they walk in. Even some people would love just a wave, a head nod, not hi, welcome in, what can we do? For me personally, and I know a lot of my employees throughout time struggled this as well, which is why I relate to them, struggle to do those things that are the guidelines because they don't feel real. That's not how I interact with people. One of the analogies retailers will use often is treat it like you're the host of a party. I think that's a great analogy for customer service. But how I greet my guests is not exactly, I'm not like, welcome in, Bekki, to my home. That's just like not me. I'd be like, hey, Bekki, welcome in. Wine's over there. Feel free to grab a glass. And so all this to say that there are regional tastes in terms of what services that are so different. If it rains in Seattle, they're used to that. They're coming out and they're shopping. In Boston, when it rains, if my sales are down, it wasn't because I didn't greet every person and harass them to buy things. It's because either people weren't out shopping or sometimes people are literally coming in to get out of the rain and they have no intention of buying anything. So just having that knowledge and understanding of how people are different across a country or countries.
My favorite greeting at a store, I think, is, hey, let me know if you need anything. That's it.
And the hard part about that is, and I get the corporate side too, is to some people, that's terrible service. They would be mad. They would think that was like flippant or that employee didn't care. And so I think the lesson to learn from that is when it comes to directives about customer service specifically, there is no one way to service humans, period.
Amen.
Like you can't provide the booklet on customer service because every single person who walks in wants something different. What we can do is encourage our employees to be humans and to be themselves. And in the case of me, when I was at Williams-Sonoma, me and my team were so in sync. We used to do this thing where this sounds judgmental and I promise it's not. We would sort of assess a customer on walking in, and depending on our assessment, a different one of us would help them. Because my version of helping people is not the same as one of my favorite employees I've ever had, Ria, who could be my mother, and versus Allison, who I also work with. Three of us so different. And we would just approach customers as ourselves, but we would choose, is that like an Allison customer? Is that a Ria customer? Is that a Matt customer? What's the vibe that we're getting? And sometimes we'd switch. I would go up to Ria because I was not good at people who were like overly indecisive. And I'd be like, Ria, this is all you. You have the patience and you're going to help them and you'll be with them for an hour and it's going to bring you joy and it will only aggravate me and make me not give great service. I went off tangent here, but not everything can be a guideline. Some things are just be a human. We trust you. Go forth.
You are empowered to be a human and assess the situation and do the thing, which is sell our stuff and give great customer service. You make an important point about team morale and authenticity. I don't think you'd find a retailer out there who is, we don't want you to be yourself, right? Like everyone is talking about bring your whole self to work and authenticity. So in practice, let's talk about that a little bit, because what you just described sounds like a fun place to work. Tell me, have you worked at places where there was less empowerment to show up like a human and offer great customer service? And what effect did that have on your team morale?
I think we talk a lot about authenticity and bringing yourself to work. I don't think companies actually want that because I think it scares them. What does that mean? How are we going to manage all of these different people? It's easier if we can hire a type or a vibe or a specific thing. I want to shout out companies when I feel like they're doing something really well. Shout out to Lush, because truly, the best place I've worked in terms of being myself and just bringing my actual whole self to work. I could be weird, I could be strange, I could be loud, I could be quiet. There wasn't a way that I felt like, oh, now I'm in work mode and I must perform accordingly. And what that does for service is really makes it more genuine. Because then it really is like I'm the host of you are coming into my house. Because here's the thing, we pretend like customers don't know what customer service voice is. They know when you go up an octave and you're like, hey, how are you? And then immediately start talking to your coworker. And yeah, so anyway, I was at that party. They can tell that was forced for them. But also it makes it a better place to work because it really makes it so that people are less exhausted at the end of the day. It's going to lead to less burnout because you're not playing a role for 8 hours. That is exhausting. And for a lot of people, it's exhausting. And I think what true authenticity can do to the workplace is it forces people not to expend unnecessary energy putting on some persona or mask and just allows them to do their job to the best of their ability in their own body.
Let humans be humans. Let them be themselves. But it feels like it can turn into a vicious cycle where corporate, maybe in the name of brand protection, sees an inconsistency, like you said, or maybe it's turnover, right? So they create all of these rules, standards, and guidelines in the name of brand experience because probably they're tired of answering the same questions over again. But then stores can start to feel constrained and they become less engaged. And when they do that, the customer experience suffers and the metrics decline. And so corporate adds more controls and the cycle continues. And the impact it has on trust, because that's where we're heading next. It's, from listening to you, it sounds like you begin to feel like your judgment isn't trusted, which is a huge problem because no one is more aware of what your store customers need or team needs than you. Both sides get frustrated and the gap that this whole conversation is about just keeps widening, despite wanting the same things and just going about it in misguided ways. So that brings us to the trust and safety gap. When store teams don't feel safe giving honest feedback or being themselves, corporate doesn't get an accurate picture of the store reality. So it creates a cycle where real problems go unsolved and both sides protect themselves, like we said, and their problems, instead of solving issues together. Any krakens you want to unleash?
Yeah, I think I will always die on the hill that the thing that is super important in retail, probably every job, but really important in retail that's not allowed enough is mistakes and trusting people to learn from them and grow from them. Maybe you have to guide them, but I feel, to go back to the point we were just talking about, constraints, these guidelines, these rules are really also an effort to make it so that people don't make mistakes. But that's where you grow, that's where you learn, and that's also how trust is built, is this ability to err. One of the things I always felt about retail too is, say you have a district manager. I actually am a big proponent. I think there should be less stores per district manager. I realize how much that would cost. District managers probably agree with me. Store managers might hate that idea. They might be more overseen. But the reason is I always felt like if a district has 10 stores, district managers don't have time for people to be making mistakes. There's too many fires they're putting out. So they need to use all of these rules and regulations and not trust you so that you can't make mistakes. If we were allowed mistakes and if they had time to come in after the mistake and be like, okay, how do we move on from here? That is, quite frankly, the textbook definition of how you build trust. And you can't do that if you're not allowed to make mistakes, as if things are made to seem like if you make a mistake, the world's going to end. And as I've said to you before, if I put a bunch of red sweaters next to the orange pants, that's a terrible decision financially and visually. But what's the worst that happens? We laugh about that one time I put red sweaters with orange pants, but I learned and I grew. That's what happens. And then you eventually trust that I know it's right because you've seen that growth.
So speaking of mistakes, there's a big push right now, and I think there's merit to the idea that corporate leaders need to spend more time in stores to understand the reality, to come full cycle, to understand the reality of the day-to-day. But talking about mistakes and trust and guarding your own problems, what happens before and during a corporate visit?
Well, you're putting on a play. You're putting on a production. Everyone has their mark on the stage. The set is beautiful. They're not allowed to go behind the set. Like you're creating Disney World for a day. Everyone's in character, and that doesn't give them the full view. A lot of work goes into those days. You get resources you don't normally get for the customer, but you get it for the corporate visit. Labor, help from other stores, etc. And yeah, they're just not getting the full picture of what really happens in the day-to-day.
Who authorizes that extra labor for a corporate store visit?
Typically a DM or a regional.
And so what happens the night before? You have a whole bunch of extra hands.
The night before, the week before, depends on the company and the expectation of a corporate visit. I've seen corporate visits at bigger retailers where it's like a week and a half ahead because they're trying to create the showroom version of that store.
This blew my mind the first time I learned about it. Here we are complaining that corporate doesn't understand the store reality, and then hearing that when corporate does come, they get something entirely different. So that's to point out a way that store leaders are playing a role in keeping this reality hidden in this divide. That said, I think there's a valid reason why they're not comfortable showing them the way things are, going back to psychological safety and trust. What would happen, do you think, if an executive came to visit your store and things weren't Disneyland perfect?
So typically for a corporate visit, they visit multiple stores. They're not going to fly across the country to visit one store. Let's say they're going to visit 3 stores. 3 stores is relatively typical. They can do 3 in a day and zoom through an area. It depends on how many stores aren't looking good. If one store doesn't look good, store manager is in trouble. If 2 stores don't look good, store manager and district are in trouble. If all 3 suck, all heads are rolling under the VP or whoever is visiting. It depends on how many are not looking good, who's getting in trouble, and who can point blame to where. It's just the blame game.
I've heard you say with a lot of visits, whether it's your DM or an executive, the phrase, "What can I do for you? How can I help you today?" I get the sense that it doesn't always feel safe to give them authentic feedback.
I have never given an answer to that question. I always say, I'm good. I don't need anything. Part of it for me is a point of pride, for sure. Part of it is that I don't think there's a real answer I can give where I'm going to get actual help in return. I would probably just get coaching on how to be better in something. I wouldn't get actual help. And those are not the same thing. For all of you listening, those are not the same thing. Coaching is not help. I know you think it's help, but it's not help. Help is tangible. I can touch help.
Say more.
Because I think if you were to, now here's the thing. I am not stupid enough to complain about payroll, but I'll use it as an example here. If you were to say, listen, I'm really struggling. I do think that this store, and actually this did happen to me in one company. I said, I've looked at everyone else's payroll model for the district because we could see everyone's payroll. And I'm like, for the volume I'm doing, I think the algorithm is like wrong, because it was like an algorithm that figured out our labor. I was like, I think it's wrong. It just doesn't make sense. In this particular company, it was like basically a secret. They would not tell you how that formula was derived. They would tell you certain things, but it didn't make sense. They were like, maybe we can take a look at your schedule and see if you're scheduling appropriately. It was all about what am I doing wrong? That's not help. That's not help. That is not help. I will die on that hill. And I'm not saying I know everything. Far from it. But I do think that people have to know their managers. And if they had just recently changed the payroll model, that's important to know. Someone who was capable of success, someone who's done a schedule that has delivered results week after week. I was rolling in bonuses. Clearly, I know what I'm doing. So when I'm asking you, this is not a new manager or someone newly promoted. So I don't need you to look at my schedule. That's condescending. The few times in my career that I have actually said, actually, what you can, it has been turned back to, well, let me teach you. Maybe you don't know the best way to do X. That doesn't really feel like help. Help is, I'm going to look into this payroll model thing and I'm going to get you some answers. I'm not saying help is you get me more payroll. Maybe you can't. I'm saying help is you are going to take my concern seriously and you're going to dig in and be a dog with a bone and ask anyone you need to ask to get me the answers. So at the worst case scenario, you'll come back to me and go, you know what, Matt? That is just the way it is. And here is why, and here's the answers. That's help.
Right. So we're talking a lot about authentic feedback and being able to make mistakes. What about suggestions? Do you feel trusted or do you feel like you have the psychological safety to make a suggestion, to do what we're all saying we want to do, make the store experience better and have a more successful store?
In my experience, you can when you're winning. You have to be winning. Let's say your district, I won't say larger than that. I would say if there's 10 stores, you better be in the top 3 if you want to make a suggestion. If you're not in the top 3, your suggestions will sound like you're making an excuse for your result. So I think there's psychological safety when you have the numbers.
So you can't come with a problem necessarily, and you can't come with a problem, but hey, I've got a potential solution.
Not if you're not performing, no.
Little chicken and egg thing happening here. Well, I wanted to end on that one because I feel like it's central to this whole discussion, because without the psychological safety, none of the other problems, the metrics, the brand protection, the communication can be effectively addressed. It's why throwing technology or training at problems doesn't work. We need to fix the foundation first. Right at the top of this episode, I said, I don't think the problem is technology. I think it's basic human. And so, yeah, this idea of trust is at the core of it. We've covered a lot of ground. We've unpacked a number of key paradoxes and gaps that keep the corporate store disconnect in place. What makes this disconnect so fascinating to me is that it is deceptively simple, yet incredibly complex to solve because of these legacy systems that are broken. I would say both corporate and store teams are operating rationally within their constraints. They both want the same things, successful stores and happy customers, but these established patterns and legacy systems are keeping us from achieving the shared goals. And I think it's important to know, even though we do tie a financial cost to this, the one we use the most is that disengaged teams see 7% lower sales than engaged ones. But the cost isn't just financial. It is deeply human. It shows up in burned out teams, frustrated leaders, and missed opportunities to actually serve your customers. So in the following episodes, we'll dive deeper into each of these challenges and explore practical ways to start breaking these patterns. Understanding these dynamics is the first step to meaningful change. And that's why we wanted to dedicate this whole show to understanding those things. Matt, thanks as always for being candid and sharing your insights from the front line.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking great questions.
Any last thoughts?
I do want to say one final thing, and that is to your point about there's a human cost. Retail has lost a ton of great leaders, especially in recent years. People who are like, I'm done, I'm escaping, I'm leaving. And that's been also a real cost, because some of those people could be running a great store right now, but they got so burnt out. They left retail permanently and they're never coming back. And that's a cost of all of this, I think. We don't really factor in very often.
I think it's a great point. An additional goal of this podcast: no more great leaders lost. Let's make it somewhere they actually want to stay.
You're listening to Dear Corporate, Love Stores.